Welcome to Silent Heart Stories, where every story brings you a journey of love, fate, sacrifice, and the untamed world of alphas and omegas. Now let's begin. Alora Finch caught the smallest thief with half an apple pie hanging from his mouth. He stood beneath her kitchen window, frozen in the pale morning sunlight, one cream-colored paw resting inside an overturned basket. Flour dusted his nose. A strip of pastry clung to one ear. Two other wolf pups waited behind him. The gray one had already dragged an entire pie beneath the garden table. The black pup stood between his brothers and Ara, trying very hard to look dangerous. It might have worked if his tail had not been hiding a second stolen pie. Ara placed both hands on her hips. "Well," she said quietly, "this is disappointing." The black pup lowered his head and growled. Ara glanced at the pastry behind him. "Not the stealing, your technique." His growl stopped. For one strange moment, all three pups stared at her. They were too thin. That was the first thing Truly noticed. Beneath their dirty fur, their ribs showed faintly. The smallest trembled despite the warmth drifting from her bakery. None wore a collar. None carried the scent of a nearby family. They looked less like wild animals and more like children who had been hungry for too long. Alora's expression softened. She slowly lowered herself to the grass. The black pup moved in front of the others, his small body stiff with warning. "All right," she murmured. "No touching." She reached behind her, took another warm pie from the windowsill, and broke it into 3 uneven pieces. The gray pup stared at the largest one. Alora noticed. "Oh, absolutely not. You already stole a whole pie?" The gray pup looked away with such exaggerated innocence that she nearly laughed. She placed the pieces on the ground and pushed them forward. Then she waited. She did not call them. She did not reach for them. She simply sat, with flour on her apron and the morning breeze moving, loose strands of brown hair across her face. The smallest pup approached first, one uncertain step, then another. He sniffed the pastry, looked at, and quickly took the piece. The gray one followed. The black pup remained where he was until both brothers had begun eating. Only then did he move. Ara watched him choose the smallest portion. Her heart tightened. "You always make sure they eat first, don't you?" His dark ears twitched. Before he could take another bite, a horn sounded beyond the orchard. The pups went completely still. A second horn answered from the eastern road. Then came the pounding of horses. The smallest pup dropped his food. "No," whispered. "It's all right." It was not all right. 12 mounted guards swept through the orchard gates, wearing the silver armor of the royal household. Wolves ran beside their horses, large and battle-scarred, their eyes searching every tree and shadow. At the center rode a man in a black cloak. He was broader than the soldiers around him, his dark hair touched with silver at the temples. Even from a distance, authorities seemed to gather around him like storm clouds. Alpha King Kalen Thorn. All knew his face from coins and winter proclamations. The coins had failed to mention how tired his eyes looked. The king saw the pups. His horse had barely stopped before he was on the ground. "My sons." The words were low, almost broken. Allah looked from him to the 3 small wolves. Her breath caught royal airs. She had just accused 3 princes of being bad thieves. The gray pup still had pie filling on his chin. A guard raised his spear when the black pup bared his teeth. "Stand back, Captain Lysa Rowe," ordered Ara. "They are unstable." Ara did the exact opposite. She stepped between the spear and the pups. The entire orchard fell silent. Kalen's eyes fixed on her. "Move." His voice was calm, but it carried enough power to make the guards straighten. Allah's knees nearly obeyed before the smallest pup pressed against her ankle. Then the other two rushed behind her skirt. The gray one became tangled in the fabric and nearly pulled her sideways. Ara caught herself on the table. "This would be a much more impressive rescue," she muttered, "if none of us fell over." No one laughed. But Kalen's gaze shifted briefly toward the pup trapped in her skirt, and something almost human moved beneath his hard expression. Pain, not anger. Pain that his children had chosen a stranger's shadow instead of his arms. A thin man in healer's robes hurried forward, carrying a silver case. "Their medicine, Your Majesty." The moment the case opened, the pups panicked. The black one snapped at the air. The gray pup tried to crawl beneath Aller's apron. The smallest began shaking so violently that his claws dug into the soil. The healer poured blue liquid onto a spoon. Ara smelled it from several feet away. Sweet herbs, bitter roots, and beneath them something cold and metallic silver. She looked down as the smallest pup whimpered. His mouth opened and she saw a faint blue stain beneath his tongue. Kalen reached for him. The pup recoiled and buried his face against leg. The king froze. Ara could feel every eye in the orchard upon her. She swallowed, suddenly aware that she was standing between the most powerful alpha in the north and the sons he had been searching for. Kalen's voice dropped. "What did you give them?" "Apple pie," the healer scoffed. Allah looked directly at the king, though courage and good judgment were having a serious disagreement inside her. "I don't know why they came to me," she said, "but I know they aren't afraid of the pie." Her eyes moved toward the blue spoon. "They're afraid of that." For the first time that morning, the Eolvi Alpha King looked at his royal healer as though he might be looking at an enemy. No one moved. The blue medicine trembled slightly inside royal healer Auric Dean's spoon. Kalen looked at the faint stain beneath his youngest son's tongue, then at the man holding the silver case. "What is in it?" Auric stiffened. "The same calming mixture they have received for months." "Your Majesty." "That was not my question." The softness in Kalen's voice disappeared. Auric lowered the spoon. "Moonroot, Valyan, winter." A trace of silver ash to control violent shifting. Allah's stomach tightened. The smallest pup pressed harder against her leg. "You give silver to wolf children?" she asked. Auric turned on her. "You are a baker." "Yes," Allah said. "Which means I know not to put poison in things simply because it has a respectable name." Several guards glanced at one another. Captain Lisa covered a cough that sounded suspiciously like a laugh. Kalen did not smile, but his eyes stayed on Ara for half a second longer than before. First Counselor Garen Vey arrived moments later in a dark green carriage, wearing a heavy cloak and the irritated expression of a man who believed emergencies should wait until after breakfast. He bowed to the king, then he looked at Ara. Recognition came slowly, followed by quiet contempt. Ara Finch, her shoulders stiffened. "You know her?" Kalen asked. Garen folded his hands behind his back. She once worked in the outer kitchens. She was dismissed for stealing royal food. The orchards seemed to grow colder. The guards looked at Ara differently now. Even Kaylin's expression hardened. Ara could have explained. She could have told them about the bread thrown away each evening, about the children waiting behind the kitchen wall, about her little sister coughing beneath a thin blanket while full baskets were fed to pigs. Instead, she looked down at the three pups. I took food that was going to be burned. That was not your decision to make, Garen replied. No, said hungry people, rarely get to make the important decisions. Kaylin studied her face. You expect me to believe my sons wandered here by accident and chose the bakery of a known thief? Allah looked at the gray pup, who had quietly begun licking apple filling from the table egg. I would hesitate to call any of us known thieves while His Highness is still destroying evidence. Milo stopped licking. He slowly sat down. Captain Lisa turned away. This time, Kaylin's mouth moved. Not quite a smile, but close enough to make Elo forget what she was about to say, only for a heartbeat. Then Garen ordered the guards to bring the royal food chest. Bowls of meat, broth, and softened grain were placed on the grass. Everything smelled rich and carefully prepared. None of the pups approached. Auric pushed a bowl toward Alden. The black pup growled. All went back inside the bakery and returned with a plain meat pie. She broke off a piece and ate it herself. Garen frowned. What are you doing? Testing for poison with your own life? Allah swallowed. It is either courage or poor planning. I haven't decided. She placed the remaining pieces on the grass. EMTT crept forward first, then Milo. Alden waited until both brothers had eaten before taking his portion. They finished, every crumb. Colin's gaze dropped to their thin bodies. When did they last eat? Auric answered too quickly. This morning, all three pups turned their heads toward him. The silence that followed felt almost accusatory. Kaylin looked at the untouched royal bowls. Bring me the nursery food records. Garen stepped forward. Your Majesty, the children must be returned to the quiet wing. They are ill, frightened, and clearly influenced by this woman. Allah's fingers curled against her apron. They are not influenced. They are hungry. You have no authority here. No, she said softly, but apparently I have breakfast. Milo sneezed flour onto her skirt. Ara looked down and several unpaid assistants. Kaylin's gaze followed hers. For the first time, the tension around him eased. It lasted only a moment, but Era saw the man beneath the crown, a tired father, watching his children eat without fear. Then Garen spoke again. The eastern flower passage should be inspected. Though it has been sealed for years, perhaps the pups found some opening. Kaylin went still. Captain Lisa looked sharply at the counselor. No one had mentioned a flower passage. No one had explained how the pups escaped. Garen seemed to realize his mistake. He adjusted one glove and looked away. Kaylin said nothing, but something changed in his eyes. The suspicion was no longer aimed only at Ara. He stepped closer to her. The pups pressed against her skirt, yet she forced herself not to retreat. You will come to the palace, he said. Her heart dropped. As a prisoner, as a witness? That answer was almost comforting. His dark eyes held hers. Do you always speak to kings this way? Only when I'm nervous, and are you nervous now? All glanced at the armed guards, the royal healer, the accusing counselor, and 3 princes tangled around her ankles. Not even slightly. A quiet breath escaped Kaelin. It might have been amusement. It might have been disbelief. He removed a small silver token from his cloak and handed it to Captain Liza. Alora Finch will receive access to the quiet wing for 3 days. She will prepare their meals under guard. Nothing enters that nursery unless she has seen it. Garen's face tightened. Auric went pale. Behind Ara, the pups heard the words, "Quiet wing." Alden stopped breathing. Milo dropped the last piece of crust. EMTT began to shake. Then all 3 backed away from the king, the healer, and the palace road. Whatever waited inside that nursery frightened them more than the soldiers surrounding them. Kaelin had finally begun to wonder why. The 3 princes did not fight the journey back to Blackpine Keep. They simply refused to leave Ara. EMTT rode in her lap beneath a borrowed blanket. Milo sat beside her in the carriage, watching every turn as though memorizing the road. Back to the bakery. Alden remained near the door, his black body tense between his brothers and everyone else. Kaelin rode beside the carriage. Whenever looked through the window, she found his eyes on his sons, not commanding, not angry, watching as though he was trying to understand how they had become strangers while living beneath his own roof. Black Pine Keep rose above the forest like a mountain carved by winter. Guards opened 3 iron gates before the carriage reached the inner courtyard. The moment stepped down, servants stopped moving. Some stared at her flower-stained skirt. Others stared at the royal pups gathered around her boots. One young maid whispered, "That is the bakery thief." Ara adjusted EMTT in her arms. At least they remembered my profession. Callan heard her. His mouth tightened, but this time she knew he was hiding amusement. Captain Lisa led them through a maze of stone corridors. The deeper they went, the colder the palace became. Milo stayed close enough to brush Aller's ankle. Alden watched every guard. EMTT buried his nose against her neck whenever footsteps approached too quickly. At last, they reached a heavy oak door at the far end of a silent hallway. 2 locks covered the outside. Ara stopped. Why does a nursery need locks on this side? Auric appeared behind them for protection. Who's coming? He did not answer. Captain Lisa unlocked the door. Cold air met them. First, the room beyond had once been beautiful. Faded silver stars covered the ceiling. Wooden wolves rested on dusty shelves. 3 small beds stood beneath closed windows, but the curtains had been nailed shut. Leather straps hung from the bedposts. Bowls of untouched food sat near the cold fireplace. Alora felt EMTT begin to shake. She slowly lowered him to the floor. "No one is touching you," she whispered. "Not unless you ask." The little wolf pressed against her leg. Callan entered behind them and went completely still. His gaze moved from the restraints to the bowls, then to the dust covering a carved wooden horse. "I ordered this room kept warm." Auric cleared his throat. "The cold helps control fever. There is no fire." The children became violent near open flames. Alden growled. Kaelin looked at him. The growl stopped, but the pup did not lower his head. All crossed the room and opened one of the food bowls. The broth smelled of old meat and bitter herbs. Milo sneezed and backed away. Was this meant for them? "It is a royal recovery diet," Auric said. "It smells like a boot." Captain Lisa glanced at the bowl. A medicinal boot, Allah added politely. Colin almost smiled again. Almost. He ordered fresh ingredients from the kitchen. Allah insisted they be delivered unopened. She washed every knife and bowl herself, while the pups watched from beneath the table. Colin remained in the doorway. You do not trust my kitchen. I do not trust anything they are afraid to eat. And you expect 3 pies to solve this? No. Allah sliced cooked chicken into small pieces. But food should not require courage. His expression changed. The hardness did not vanish, it simply made room for thought. She prepared a thin broth with chicken, barley, and a little salt. Nothing strong, nothing blue. Before offering it to the princes, she tasted every bowl. Milo crept forward first, then EMTT. Alden stayed behind, them watching. Allah noticed and moved his bowl closer to his brothers. You can guard them while you eat. His ears lifted. Only then did he lower his head. Kaelin watched the 3 bowls empty. How long have they refused food? Oric answered. Their appetites have been unstable. That means you do not know, Kaelin said. The healer went silent. Night settled over the palace. Alora expected to be dismissed once the princess slept, but EMTT began whining the moment she stepped toward the door. She returned to the rug beside the fireplace. I'm not leaving, she told him. Kaelin stood near the window, while Captain Lisa lit the first fire the room had seen in weeks. The warmth came slowly, so did sleep. Milo curled against Hip. Alden lay near the door. EMTT rested across her lap, his breathing shallow. Near midnight, his body suddenly stiffened. Allah caught him before he struck the floor. EMTT. The small wolf trembled violently. Kaelin crossed the room in 2 steps. What is happening? I don't know. For several terrifying seconds. Golden light moved beneath the pup's fur. His paws became small hands. His face changed. A little boy appeared in Allah's arms, pale and frightened, with damp curls stuck to his forehead. Kanal stopped breathing. EMTT's fingers closed around Eller's sleeve. No blue spoon, he whispered. His eyes moved toward his father. Please. Then the light vanished. The child became a wolf again and collapsed against chest. Kaelin knelt beside them. His hand hovered over his son, but did not touch him. For the first time, Alar saw fear strip the king of every title he carried. Was that the medicine? He asked. Allah looked at the leather straps, the untouched bowls, and the locked door. I think, she said softly, it was never medicine to them. Outside the room, something scraped against wood. Captain Lisa opened the medicine cabinet. The blue bottle was gone. She searched the cabinet twice. The bottle did not return. No lock had been broken. No windows stood open. The guards outside swore no one had passed them. Kaelin rose slowly from beside his son. Who has a key? Lysa's expression hardened. Royal Healer Oric, First Counselor V, and me. All looked at the empty shelf. Then either one of you took it, she said, or your locks are mostly decorative. Lisa stared at her. All cleared her throat. That sounded kinder in my head. A faint breath escaped Kaelin before his face became serious again. Seal this corridor. No one leaves without being searched. Oric protested immediately. Your Majesty, this is unnecessary. The woman may have hidden the bottle herself. EMTE stirred in Era's arms. Alden rose and placed himself between Oric and his little brother. Kaelin noticed. So far, the king said, "My sons have trusted her judgment more than yours." Oric's face tightened. Allah did not enjoy the warmth those words created inside her chest. She especially did not enjoy how quickly it disappeared when Callan looked at her directly. "Can you identify what was in the medicine?" "I can identify what does not belong in food," she said. "For the rest, you need a healer who is willing to question another healer." An hour later, Captain Lisa brought healer Nessa Reed into the quiet wing through a side entrance. Nessa was young, plainly dressed, and nervous enough to nearly bow into the doorframe. She examined the blue stain beneath EMTT's tongue. Then she smelled the spoon Oric had left behind. Her face lost color. "This may contain Arjun Bane." Colin's eyes sharpened. "Silver poison. In small amounts, it causes weakness, confusion, fever, and unstable shifting. Given slowly, it could look like an inherited illness." Allah held EMTT closer. "Can it be removed?" Nessa nodded carefully. "If the exposure stops, warm fluids, charcoal from rowanwood, rest, and time. But I need the original medicine to know the dose." "The bottle is missing," Liza said. Nessa looked toward the locked cabinet. "It was here yesterday." Everyone turned to her. She lowered her voice. "I was ordered to prepare fresh bandages. I saw Royal Healer Oric measuring the medicine." "Was he alone?" Kaelin asked. Nessa hesitated. Before she could answer, an elderly nurse entered with clean blankets. The moment she saw Nessa, she froze. Kaelin stepped toward her. "How were my sons given the medicine?" The woman's hands began to shake with a spoon. "Your Majesty," and when they refused, her eyes moved toward the leather straps. Ara felt Alden stiffen busy her. The nurse whispered, "We were told it was necessary." "By whom?" "We only use the restraints when Lord." She stopped. Fear closed around her face. "Which Lord?" Callan asked. "I misspoke." She backed toward the door. Liza blocked her path, but Kaelin lifted one hand. "Let her go." Ara looked at him in surprise. The nurse hurried away. Kaelin watched the empty doorway. "A frightened witness says whatever keeps her alive," he said quietly. "I want to know who frightened her." There was no anger in his voice. That made the promise more dangerous. By afternoon, the nurse had vanished from the palace. Her room had been emptied. Her name had been removed from the servant schedule. The official report claimed she had requested transfer to a southern estate. "No one packs this neatly while terrified," Allah said. Kaelin stood beside her in the servant corridor, close enough that his sleeve brushed hers. "You notice small things. Small things are usually what powerful people forget to hide." His gaze rested on her face. "And what do I forget?" The question was softer than she expected. Ara looked away first at the moment that you are standing on Milo's tail. Kaelin stepped aside immediately. Milo gave him a deeply offended look. For one brief second, Alara laughed. The sound seemed strange in the cold corridor. Kaelin stared at her as though he had not expected laughter to belong inside his palace anymore. Then Milo scratched at the wall. Behind a faded tapestry, he found a narrow wooden panel. The pup pushed his nose into a hidden gap and disappeared. "Milo," Kaelin called. Allah knelt beside the opening. He has inherited your respect for instructions. I am beginning to suspect none of my sons have. they followed him into a dark passage smelling of dust, flour, and damp stone. The tunnel sloped beneath the quiet wing toward the old palace kitchens. Halfway down, Milo stopped beside a crack in the wall and pawed at something black. All pulled free a burned piece of paper. Most of the writing had been destroyed, but one word remained beside a royal supply mark. Our henbane below it was the seal of the provision office, Garinve's office. A bell suddenly rang above them. Then another Lisa ran toward the tunnel entrance. Fire. Smoke poured through the passage. When they reached the courtyard, flames were already consuming the kitchen archive. Servants formed lines with buckets, but the oldest food records were burning too quickly to save. Kaelin stood beneath the falling ash. The scorched page closed inside his fist. Someone had stolen the medicine. Someone had removed a witness. Now someone was destroying every record that could explain why poison had entered his children's room. All looked at the fire reflected in his dark eyes. "This was not panic," she whispered. "They knew exactly what we found." Kaelin turned toward the palace. For the first time, he no longer looked like a father searching for answers. He looked like a king preparing for war. This time, the enemy was already inside his walls. The fire in the kitchen archive burned until dawn. By morning, the oldest records had become black flakes drifting across the courtyard. Servants swept ash from the stone. Guards searched every room connected to the tunnel. No one found the missing nurse. No one found the blue medicine. Kaelin did not leave the quiet wing. He sat near the fireplace while his sons slept around. His crown rested on the table beside untouched reports. Without it, he looked less like the most feared alpha in the north and more like a man who had forgotten how to rest. EMTT slept across Ara's lap. Milo had curled beneath her arm. Alden remained near the door, one dark ear lifted even in sleep. All looked at the king. "You can sit closer." Callan's gaze shifted toward Alden. "He does not want me near them. He does not know what you will do. I am their father. That is a title." Aller said gently, "Trust is a habit." The words landed harder than she intended. Kaelin looked away. For a moment, she thought he might order her from the room. Instead, he moved from the chair to the rug, leaving several feet between himself and the pups. Alden opened one eye. Kaelin stayed still. The pup watched him, then slowly lowered his head again. It was not forgiveness, but it was permission to remain. The room grew warmer as the fire strengthened. Prepared a fresh bowl of broth. Before she could set it down, Milo opened his eyes, stretched, and placed one paw directly inside it. He stared at the wet paw. Era stared at him. That was not in the recipe. Milo licked the broth from his toes. Kaelin's shoulders moved with a quiet laugh. Ara turned toward him. It was the first true laugh she had heard from the king. Low, surprised, and gone almost as soon as it appeared. He seemed embarrassed by it. That made her smile. "You should practice," she said, laughing. "It may help the guards realize you are not planning to execute someone every morning." "I am usually planning to execute someone." "Yes, that is the problem." His eyes met hers. For a few seconds, the room felt strangely small. Then EMTT sneezed against her sleeve, and the moment softened into something safer. After the children had eaten, Kaelin walked to the closed curtains. He pulled the nails free, one by one. Morning light entered the nursery for the first time in weeks. Dust rose through the golden beams. Kaylin stood beneath the faded stars painted across the ceiling. Isoldo chose those, he said. Allah remained by the fire. Their mother, he nodded. She said, children should always have something beautiful above them when they woke. His voice changed when he spoke of his late Luna. It lost its command and carried only memory. She died in this room. Alora said nothing. Callan's hand rested on the edge of the nearest bed. I was at the northern border. The council sent reports saying the fever had passed. By the time a truthful message reached me, she was already gone. He looked toward his sons. Afterward, I could not stay here. Every wall reminded me that I'd been somewhere else when my family needed me. So you kept going somewhere else, said. He turned. There was no accusation in her voice. That almost made it worse. I fought every threat beyond the border, he said. You kept fighting enemies outside because it was easier than seeing what was happening in here. Silence settled between them. Ara expected anger. Kaylin only lowered his head. Yes, the single word carried 4 years of shame. EMTT woke and made a soft sound. Kaylin moved toward him, then stopped. All shifted the pup carefully. Sit beside us. Kaylin obeyed. His hand hovered above EMTT's fur. May I? The question was meant for Lara, but she looked down at the pup. EMTT did not pull away. Kaylin touched his son's head with 2 fingers. The little wolf leaned into his palm. The king closed his eyes. Ara looked away, giving him the privacy of pretending she had not seen his face break. Later that afternoon, Alden woke trembling. Golden light moved beneath his black fur. His body shifted slowly and painfully until an exhausted boy lay on the rug. Kaylin rushed forward but stopped before touching him. Alden looked at Ara first. She handed him a blanket. You are safe. His small fingers shook as he took it. Can you tell us who gave you the blue medicine? Kaylin asked. Alden tried to speak, but no sound came. All placed charcoal and paper near him. You do not have to remember everything. The boy stared at the page. Then he began to draw. First a hand, then a heavy ring, a black bird with its wings spread. Kaylin's expression changed. He knew that symbol, the raven, he whispered. Alden nodded once. The golden light returned. His fingers became paws. Within seconds, the black wolf pup lay where the boy had been. All covered him with the blanket. Kaylin remained frozen beside the drawing. The raven was the crest of House Vey. That evening, Captain Liza entered without knocking. Your Majesty, our guards followed First Counselor Garen's courier. Kaylin stood where? To the old flower tunnel. He was, carrying a sealed medicine chest. Era's eyes moved toward the drawing. Was he alone? Lysa's jaw tightened. No, royal healer Auric was with him. The missing bottle, the burned records, and Alden's memory had finally joined together. Garen Vey and the royal healer were no longer 2 separate suspicions. Somewhere beneath the palace, they were moving the evidence before the king could reach it. Auric was gone before Kaylin's guards entered the tunnel. So was the medicine chest. They found only fresh wheel marks, 1 broken leather strap, and a blue drop drying on the stone. Captain Lisa crouched beside it. They knew we were following. Kaylin's gaze hardened. Then someone warned them. Ara stood near the tunnel wall with EMTT in her arms. The smallest prince had grown quieter since the night before. His breathing had improved, but his body still tired quickly. Milo sniffed the blue stain and sneezed so hard he fell backward. Ara caught him with one hand. That was a very dramatic medical opinion. Milo shook himself and glared at the floor. Kaelin almost smiled. Then Alden pressed against his father's leg. The black pup had never done that before. Callan looked down slowly, afraid even surprise might frighten him away. Alden stayed. It was only the weight of a small body against his boot, but Callan stood as if he had been trusted with something sacred. Allah noticed. She also noticed he did not reach down until Alden leaned closer. He was learning. Back in the quiet wing, Nessa began the next stage of treatment. She used warm broth, rowan charcoal, mineral salts, and small amounts of bitter root to help their bodies remove the argent bane. There were no chains, no closed curtains. Every bowl is prepared where the princes could watch. Milo insisted on inspecting everything. He sniffed the herbs. He watched the water boil. Then he stole one dried berry from Nessa's tray and immediately spat it onto the rug. Nessa sighed. That was medicine. All wiped Milo's tongue with a cloth. He has confirmed it. By sunset, golden light began moving beneath Alden's fur. His transformation came more easily this time. A thin boy appeared beneath the blanket, pale but awake. Milo shifted a few moments later, landing in a tangle of elbows, knees, and offended dignity. For the first time in weeks, 2 human voices filled the nursery. Milo looked down at his hands, then at Steal All the Pies. Alden closed his eyes. Ara nodded solemnly. Thank you. That clears up almost nothing. Cain turned away, but not before she saw the smile. The boys could not remember everything. Their memories came in broken pieces. A silver case, leather straps, Oryx's voice telling them, good princes did not cry. A man standing near the doorway, turning a black raven ring around his finger. Alden remembered. That man saying, increase the dose before their father returns. Kaelin's hand closed around the back of a chair. Did you see his face? Alden shook his head. He stayed in the dark. Milo looked toward the closed medicine cabinet. He smelled like cedar smoke. Garen Vey always burned cedar in his council chamber. It was not proof, but it was another thread. That evening, Kaelin summoned Garen and Oryx before the royal council. Oryx arrived late, claiming he had been tending soldiers near the southern gate. Garen entered without haste. He listened while Kaelin described the argent pain, the burned records, and Alden's drawing. Then he looked at the 2 boys sitting beside Ara. With respect, Your Majesty, children recovering from moonfall are known to suffer false memories. Alden stiffened. Milo reached for his hand. Garen continued. This woman has fed them, comforted them, and remained beside them constantly. It would be easy for frightened children to repeat what they believe she wishes to hear. Ara's cheeks warmed. Kaelin's expression went cold. She has never told them what to remember. Can you be certain? Yes. The answer came so quickly that looked at him. Callan did not glance away. Garen folded his hands. Then perhaps certainty has become easier for you than evidence. The council chamber fell silent. Ara understood the trap. If Kaelin accused Garen now, the council would call it grief, anger, or infatuation. The evidence was strong enough to create suspicion, but not yet strong enough to convict the kingdom's first counselor. Kaelin understood it too. "Until the investigation is complete," he said, "neither you nor Oryx will enter the quiet wing." Oryx's face palled. Garen only bowed. "As you command," but his eyes settled on Ara before he left. There was no contempt in them now, only calculation. Later that night, Nessa asked to speak with Ara alone. She carried a folded sheet covered in dates and measurements. "I found the dosage record hidden inside an old fever ledger," she whispered. The amount was increased every time the king was expected home. Ara stared at the pattern. The dates matched Callan's returns from the border. They kept the children weakest when he was near, so he would see illness, not recovery. Nessa folded the page again. "I need to give this to him." Footsteps sounded in the corridor. Nessa went still. Ara opened. The door. No one was there. Only a small pool of black sealing wax rested on the floor. The raven crest had been pressed into its center. By morning, Nessa's bed had not been slept in. Her medical bag lay open. The dosage record was gone. Across the palace, servants were hanging silver banners for a harvest feast. Garen Bey had announced without the king's permission. A celebration where the recovering princes would appear before the entire kingdom. All looked at the banners. Then at Kaelin, "This feast is not meant to prove they are well." His eyes darkened. "No, it is meant to make sure everyone sees when something goes wrong." Somewhere inside Black Pine Keep, Garen was no longer hiding his fear. He was preparing to turn it into a public execution. The harvest feast began beneath silver banners and a sky too bright for betrayal. Long tables filled the courtyard of Black Pine Keep. Musicians played near the fountain. Villagers stood beside nobles, all waiting to see the three princes who had been hidden from them for months. Ara disliked every part of it, the crowd, the guards, the way Garen smiled, as though the celebration belonged to him. Most of all, she disliked how tightly EMTT held her hand. "You do not have to go out there," she whispered. The youngest prince looked toward his father. Kaelin stood a few steps away in ceremonial black. Speaking quietly with Urgia, Captain Liza, he had refused Garen's demand that the children appear alone. Alden and Milo would enter beside him. EMTT had chosen Ara. The decision had caused 6 counselors to look as though someone had served them cold porridge. Ara considered that a small victory. Kaelin approached and adjusted the silver clasp on EMTT's cloak. His fingers brushed. Neither moved away immediately. "You are worried," he said. "I am surrounded by smiling nobles. It seems sensible." His eyes softened. "Stay near me." That sounded almost like an order. It was a request. Ara studied him. He was learning faster than she expected. That was much better. The corner of his mouth lifted. Then the horns sounded. The royal family entered the courtyard. Alden walked beside his father, pale but proud. Milo waved at the crowd, then nearly walked into a pillar because he was watching himself, reflected in a silver serving tray. All caught his shoulder. "Royal dignity," she whispered. "I was checking for assassins. In the tray, they could be very small." She laughed despite herself. For several precious minutes, the feast felt almost normal. The boys ate roasted chicken, warm bread, and small pastries prepared under Alar's supervision. Captain Liza had watched every tray from the kitchen to the royal table. Nothing had been left unattended, or so they believed. Milo reached for a small apple tart, bearing the briar hearthmark. All frowned. She had made honey cakes for the feast, not apple tarts. Milo, wait! He had already taken a bite. His face changed. The tart fell from his hand. Milo gasped and collapsed. The courtyard erupted. Allah caught him before his head struck the stone. His body convulsed against her arms. Alden shouted for his brother. EMTT began crying. Kalen dropped to his knees beside them. What happened? Get Nessa, Ara said. The words left her before she remembered Nessa was missing. Auric pushed through the guards carrying his silver case. He has been poisoned. Ara looked up sharply. You have not examined him. Auric ignored her. He picked up the fallen tart, broke it open, and touched the filling to a test strip. The paper turned blue. Argan Bane. A wave of horror moved through the crowd. Garen stepped forward. That pastry bears the baker's seal. Every face turned toward Milo's breathing grew shallow. She pressed 2 fingers to his throat. Kalen, he needs Rowan charcoal and warm salt water now. Auric seized her wrist. Do not let her touch him. Kalen's growl shook the table. Remove your hand. Auric released her immediately. Captain Lisa ordered the courtyard sealed, while another healer carried Milo inside. A search began before the music had fully stopped. Within the hour, guards returned from Briar Hearth Bakery, carrying a small blue bottle found inside flour bin. Garen held it up before the council. The same poison used against the heirs. All stared at the bottle. I have never seen that. You expect us to believe someone entered your bakery, hid poison in your flour, copied your seal, and changed a guarded tray? Garen asked. Yes. A noble scoffed. All looked at him. I agree. It sounds inconvenient. Unfortunately, lies rarely organize themselves for our comfort. No one laughed. Kalen stood at the center of the hall. Milo's blood still staining one sleeve. His face revealed nothing. Allah searched his eyes for the man who had sat beside his children in the cold nursery, for the man who had trusted her when Garen questioned their memories. Did you poison my son? He asked. The question hurt more than she expected. No. Did anyone have access to your flour? My bakery was searched after the fire. Guards came and went. Supply workers delivered new sacks. Garen spread his hands. Convenient. Kalen turned to Leza. Keep under guard in the eastern guest chamber. No chains. No one enters without your permission. Allah's chest tightened. As a witness, she asked quietly. His silence answered. The guards escorted her away. Kalen did not look at Garen. He looked only at her. There was doubt in his face, but there was pain too. Ara wanted to believe that mattered. It did not open the door. By nightfall, the eastern guest chamber had somehow become the old kitchen cold room. The door locked behind her. Darkness closed around the stone walls. Aller's breathing broke. She pressed both hands against the wood. No, she whispered. No one answered. She began reciting recipes to keep from falling apart. 2 cups of flour, 1 cup of butter, a little salt. Do not panic before the oven is warm. Far above her, the 3 princes began howling. EMTT shifted into human form long enough to grab Kalen's sleeve. Not her pie, he sobbed. The man changed the tray. At the same moment, Captain Lisa examined the bottle from Ara's bakery. The wax around its neck was black. The raven crest was pressed beneath the broken seal. She ran toward the king. Then the alarm bell from the quiet wing began to ring. When Kaelin reached the nursery, one window stood open. A thin trail of blue medicine crossed the floor. EMTT was gone. The poison had never been the final attack. It had only been the distraction. Kaelin reached the eastern guest chamber and found it empty. The guard outside stood pale beneath his helmet. She was moved. "Your Majesty, by whose order?" The man swallowed. The written order carried Captain Lysa's seal. Lysa stepped closer and examined the paper. "This is not mine." Kaelin did not shout. The silence that followed was far worse. Where did they take her? The guard's eyes dropped. To the old kitchen cold room. For one terrible moment, Callan could not move. He remembered Sface when she had spoken of locked doors. He remembered how lightly she had tried to hide the fear beneath humor. Then he ran. The cold room stood beneath the oldest section of the palace, beyond a narrow staircase and 2 unused storage halls. Kaelin heard her before he reached the door. 1 cup of butter, whispered from inside. 2 cups of flour, a little salt. Her voice trembled. "Do not panic before the oven is warm." Kaelin struck the lock with his shoulder. The wood shook but held. "Ilara." She went silent. He hit it again. The metal bolt split from the frame and the door crashed inward. All stood against the far wall, arms wrapped around herself. Her face was pale. Blood covered her fingertips where she had tried to pull apart the wooden door. For once, she had no clever remark. Kaelin crossed the room but stopped before touching her. "I'm sorry," she stared at him. "I ordered you protected," he continued. "I did not check who still controlled the doors." "That sounds familiar." Her voice was quiet, but the words cut cleanly. "You believed I deserved a locked room before you checked who held the key." Callan lowered his head. "Yes." He did not defend himself. He did not mention the poison, the crowd, or his wounded son. That mattered. It did not erase what had happened. All stepped past him into the warmer hallway. "Where are the boys?" "Milo is stable. Alden is with him." And EMTT Kaelin's silence answered. Her exhaustion vanished beneath sudden fear. What happened? Captain Lysa appeared at the end of the corridor, breathing hard. The youngest prince was taken through the quiet wing window. "We found will marks leading toward the old flower tunnel." "Nessa?" Era asked. A servant saw someone matching her description inside the cart. Kaelin turned toward Lysa. "Prepare the shadow guard." "There is more," she said. Her expression softened when she looked at Ara. "Briar Hearth is burning." Era stopped. For a second, the corridor seemed to tilt around her. Her bakery, her little kitchen, with the crooked shelves, the oven she had repaired herself, the window where birds waited each morning for crumbs. Everything she had built after the palace cast her out. Kaelin reached toward her, then remembered himself and let his hand fall. "I will rebuild it." Allah looked at him. "You cannot repair everything by buying new stones?" "No." His voice was low, "but I can help you decide what stands there next." Something painful and warm moved through her chest. This was not forgiveness, but it was the first brick. Lysa unrolled an old palace map across a storage crate. The tunnel divides beneath the kitchen. One branch leads toward East Briar. the other ends somewhere below Council Hall. Nara studied the faded lines. If Garen wanted to destroy the bakery, he would use the eastern exit. Kaelin pointed to the second branch. Then EMTT is beneath the council, not exactly. She traced a narrow line almost erased by age. The old ovens had a smoke passage. It connects to the grain cellar under Council Hall. Lisa frowned. That route is too narrow for armored guards. All rolled up her sleeves. Fortunately, no one has ever accused me of being heavily armored. Kaelin looked at her injured hands. You are not going. Era raised one eyebrow. He closed his eyes briefly. The old command had come too easily. When he spoke again, his voice changed. Can you lead us? She studied him for a long moment. Yes. Relief crossed his face. But you stay where I can see you. Kaelin almost smiled. That sounded like an order. It was. And here I believed we were making progress. Despite everything, laughed softly. The sound was small, but it loosened something inside both of them. They entered the tunnel with Lysa and 4 guards. Smoke drifted through the stone passage from the burning bakery. The walls narrowed until Kaelin had to turn sideways. Allah's breathing grew shallow. The darkness pressed close. A locked room. Cold stone. No way out. She stopped. Kaelin noticed immediately. He did not grab her. He simply held out his hand. You do not have to prove anything. Yes, I do. No, he said, you already did. All looked at his open palm. Then she placed her hand in his. His fingers closed gently around hers. Not pulling, waiting, she took one step, then another. They moved deeper beneath the palace until faint voices reached them through the ceiling. Garen Vey was speaking above. 3 moon-lost heirs leave Thornmere without a successor. By law, authority passes to the Lord Protector. Kaelin's hand tightened around Ara's. Another counselor spoke. And the king? Garen's answer came calmly through the stone. By sunrise, Thornmere will no longer have one. While Kaelin searched beneath the floor for his missing son, Garen was taking his throne directly above him. The voices continued arguing over Kaelin's crown. Below the council chamber, Allah followed the narrow smoke passage until it opened behind a rusted iron grate. A child whimpered on the other side. EMTT, she whispered. The smallest prince lay beneath a wool blanket near the grain cellar wall. His wrists were tied with soft leather, as though kindness in the material could excuse cruelty in the act. Nessa sat beside him with her hands bound. Around them stood dozens of wooden crates. Some bore the royal food seal, others were marked with the blue symbol for Argent Bane. Kaelin's face became still. For months, villages had reported missing grain. His council had blamed winter roads and enemy raids. The food had never left the palace. It had been hidden beneath the room where Garen spoke about duty. Ara pushed against the grate. It did not move. Captain Lisa examined the old latch, locked from inside. Milo would have enjoyed this. All thought. Then she saw the small iron lever near the floor. The ovens needed airflow. She reached through the narrow bars and pulled. The grate fell inward with a crash, loud enough to wake every dead king beneath Blackpine Keep. A man stepped from behind the crates holding a knife. Auric. His robes were torn. Sweat covered his face. He looked less like a physician and more like a frightened animal searching for somewhere to bite. Stay back. Kaelin entered the cellar. Oryx's hand began to shake. You poisoned my sons. I followed orders. You increased the dose because Vice said they had to remain in wolf form until the council declared them moon-lost. EMTT began crying. All hurried to him while Lisa cut Nessa free. Oryx watched the king approach. He promised no child would die. Kaelin's voice dropped. And when Milo collapsed, that was not meant to happen. No, said as she untied EMTT. It was only meant to happen slowly enough that no one blamed you. Oryx looked at her with something close to hatred. Then the cellar door opened. Garenve stood at the top of the stairs. Behind him waited 4 armed council guards. His gaze moved across the open crates. Nessa, Oryx, and EMTT in Allah's arms. For the first time, his calm expression cracked. You should have remained in the cold room, he told her. Kaelin stepped between them. You should never have put her there. Garen laughed once. You are prepared to lose a kingdom over a baker. No. Callan's eyes were colder than the cellar stone. I nearly lost it because I listened to men like you instead of women like her. Garen signaled the guards. No one moved. Captain Lisa raised her sword. The Shadow Guard answers to the king. The king is emotionally compromised, Garen snapped. His heirs are diseased. His judgment has been corrupted by an Omega who fed his children sweets and climbed into his bedchamber. All blinked. I have never been in his bedchamber. Callan glanced at her despite the danger. That was the part you objected to. It was the least accurate. A startled laugh escaped Nessa. Even one of the council guards looked down to hide a smile. Garen's face darkened. He threw an oil lamp into the nearest crate. Flames rose instantly. Smoke filled the cellar. Lysa attacked the guards while Callan crossed the space between himself and Garen. Garen drew a silver blade. He aimed for the king's heart. Before he could strike, a woman appeared behind him and drove a metal pin through the mechanism holding the cellar door. It slammed against Garen's arm. The knife fell. Lady Sabine Vey stood on the stairs, pale but steady. Her father stared at her. You foolish girl. She held up a leather ledger. No, I was foolish when I believed protecting your name would protect our family. The book contained years of food shipments, Argentine purchases, and payments made to Oryx. Garen lunged for it. Kaelin struck him once. The first counselor fell to the stone. Minutes later, the great doors of the council chamber opened. The nobles turned as Kaelin entered carrying EMTT. All walked beside him with Nessa and Spine. Captain Lysa followed with Garen in chains. Alden and Milo ran across the chamber toward their brother. Then both boys shifted. 2 young wolves placed themselves beside Ara. EMTT slipped from his father's arms, changed into his cream-colored wolf form, and joined them. 3 royal pups surrounded the woman Garen had called their enemy. Arrest her, he shouted. Not one guard moved. Sabine placed the ledger on the council table. Nessa presented the hidden dosage records. Oryx, brought in under guard, confessed before the entire chamber. Kaelin looked at the men who had nearly handed his kingdom to a traitor. Power did not save my sons, he said. The person you considered powerless did. Lisa pulled Garen to his feet. As he was taken away, Callan turned toward Ara. The hall waited for him to grant her gold, land, or a royal title. He offered none of them. "What do you want?" he asked. Era looked at the three princes leaning against her skirt. For the first time in her life, no powerful man was deciding what she deserved. The choice belonged to her for several heartbeats. The council chamber remained silent. Kaelin stood before Era, with his crown slightly crooked, stood on one sleeve and his youngest son clinging to his leg in wolf form. It was not the grandest image of a king. Ara thought it might have been the most honest. "What do you want?" he asked again. Every noble waited for her to request land, jewels, or a place beside the throne. Allah looked at the three princes gathered around her skirt. Then she looked at the crates of stolen grain brought up from beneath the council hall. "I want the food returned to the villages." A murmur moved through the room. "All of it," she continued. "And I want the records made public. Every sack, every shipment, every family that was denied help." Kalin nodded. "It will be done. I want the moon loss law ended. No child should lose their name because an adult finds their illness inconvenient." "Agreed." "And I want my bakery rebuilt." Several counselors relaxed as though this request finally made sense. Ara raised one finger. "It remains mine." Kaelin's mouth curved. "Of course, the princes do not receive free pastries simply because they are royal." Milo made a wounded sound. Alden nudged him. EMTT sat on Ara's shoe and looked deeply betrayed. Kaelin glanced down at them. "This may be the first law they openly rebel against." "They already have," Ara said repeatedly. A quiet laugh spread through the chamber. It did not erase the horror of what had happened. But for the first time, laughter belonged there without fear. Garenve and Auric Dean were tried before the people of Thornmere. The testimony lasted 7 days. Nessa described the poison medicine. Captain Lisa presented the false seals. Lady Sabine read her father's ledgers aloud, even when her voice shook. Auric lost his position and was sentenced to life in Stonehold for poisoning the heirs and helping conceal the crime. Garen was stripped of his title, lands, and family crest. Every piece of property he had gained through stolen food was sold. The money rebuilt village storehouses before winter. Kaelin did not hide his own failure. He stood before the kingdom and admitted that he had trusted reports because they were easier to face than grief. He had protected borders while leaving doors inside his own home locked. "A crown does not excuse blindness," he told them. "It makes blindness more dangerous." The moon-lost law was destroyed before sunset. The quiet wing changed next. The nailed curtains were removed. The leather restraints were burned. The nursery became a healing house, where parents could remain beside sick children instead of being ordered away. Nessa was appointed its first independent healer. She accepted on the condition that no counselor could enter her medicine room without washing his hands. All privately thought that was an excellent beginning. 3 months later, Briarhearth Bakery reopened beneath a new red roof. Kaelin had offered marble counters. All chose wood. He offered golden lettering. She chose a painted sign with one corner slightly uneven. "It looks crooked," he said. "It has character. It is leaning toward the E road, so tired travelers can read it more easily." Kalin had learned that arguing with Ara often ended with him repairing something while she watched. He repaired the sign. The princes recovered slowly. Alden stopped sleeping the side doors. Milo stopped hiding food beneath his pillow. though Eller continued finding spoons in places no spoon had any reason to be. EMTT began shifting freely between boy and wolf. The first time he managed it without pain, Kalen sank to his knees and held all three sons, until Milo complained that kings were heavier than they looked. Ara watched from the doorway. Kalen looked up and held out one hand. She joined them, not because he commanded her, because he had learned to ask. 6 months after the trial, Callan found alone in the bakery after sunset. Snow touched the windows. A final tray of pies cooled on the counter. He removed his gloves slowly. I have been trying to decide how a king says this without sounding like a proclamation. That does seem difficult for you. He smiled. I do not need you to save my throne. Good. It was exhausting. I want you beside me because you make me see what I once avoided. My sons love you. I trust you. His voice softened, and somewhere between the cold room, the flower tunnel, and being insulted about my council reports, I fell in love with you. Ara's eyes warmed. That was almost romantic. Almost? You mentioned flower. It was an important tunal. She laughed. Then Cullen stepped closer, slowly enough to let her choose the distance. Allah placed one flower-covered hand against his chest. The bond between them awakened quietly. No thunder, no command from fate, only warmth, recognition, and two people choosing the same future. The next morning, Alar caught 3 wolf pups stealing a fresh pie. They ran behind her skirt just as Kalen entered. He examined the empty window's sill. Aha saw nothing. All looked at the crumbs on his sons' noses. That explains most of your old council reports. Kalen laughed openly. Outside, the bells of Thornir rang above a kingdom, learning that strength was not measured by how many people feared its king. It was measured by how many felt safe enough to come home. So this is where Ara and Kalin's story quietly closes. Are you still here with me? Then perhaps you understand why Alara's greatest strength was never the pies, the palace, or even the trust of 3 frightened princes. It was the way she carried pain without letting it decide who she would become. She was betrayed. She was misunderstood. She was locked away by people who found it easier to doubt her than question their own power. Yet she did not beg for approval. She did not trade her self-respect for a place beside the king. When trust failed, she stepped back. When the truth was hidden, she kept her dignity. And when she was finally given a choice, she chose herself before choosing tree. That is a quiet kind of courage. We cannot control who lies about us, abandons us, or misunderstands our hearts. We can control whether their actions turn us bitter or make us wiser about where we belong. And yes, guarding your peace may occasionally require fewer council meetings and more pie. If this story reminded you to protect your dignity, write dignity in the comments and gently like, share, and subscribe if you would like to hear another story with